Okay, so the big news of the week is that Valve has basically put out an announcement concerning the pricing and release date of the Steam controller, the Steam machine, and the Steam frame. And the announcement is that basically there is no announcement. Um, Citing the issues with storage costs and memory costs, basically they've committed to a release within the first half of the year, but beyond that, no new details whatsoever. Oliver, kind of to be expected, I guess, but disappointing nonetheless.
Yeah, it's kind of to be expected, although when I spoke to them, they were pretty firm about an early 2026 date, even Q1 2026. So I think this is like a kind of subtle delay. I suppose that's still
Yeah.
within the scope of first half of 2026, but I think you can probably take it as read that there's been some kind of delay here. And obviously it's kind of a reality check because they are saying that these products will be impacted by higher RAM prices. When I was at Valve in October, I discussed the RAM issue with them, but at that point it was kind of more speculative. It was like, well, hey, memory prices are going up, and not like, hey, this is kind of the end of consumer semiconductors. Not really, but it's gotten a lot worse since then. So yeah, it basically seems inevitable at this point that the Steam machine will launch for more than you thought, for later than you thought. And Valve was already signaling that Steam machine prices would be a little bit higher than a lot of people wanted it to be because they were saying it's going to be priced more like a PC than a console. But when you think about it more holistically, this is like a huge problem across the industry. RAM prices, SSD prices, advanced packaging, wafer capacity, it's all being strained by the data centers. And this is just going to be an issue for everyone. And it's especially an issue if you're trying to ship a cut price box. Like Valve was trying to ship something, it's a mass market consumer box. They're not trying to ship you something with a 5080 in it. They're really impacted by these prices. Beyond the whole pricing issue and the delay, potentially the delay, there's also a line that's interesting to me here, which is they talk about working on HDMI VRR, investigating improved upscaling and optimizing ray tracing performance in the driver. Improved upscaling, you got to think that's maybe FSR4. Maybe they're just trying to convince AMD to let them ship it. That would be a big deal. That's obviously one of the key deficits of Steam Machine, and it does seem solvable. On the VRR front, Steam Machine does support VRR, but only FreeSync VRR. It doesn't support the full HDMI 2.1 VRR because of the HDMI Forms licensing approach, as far as I understand it. AMD, they cannot implement HDMI 2.1 within their open source driver. AMD has submitted requests to include it in the open source driver for a couple of years now, and they've been rejected as far as I can tell. So at the moment, it seems like AMD is trying to implement parts of the HDMI spec in their open source driver without using the full HDMI 2.1 spec. I'm not clear on the specifics, but they're trying to do ALLM. That's the thing that I saw in the commits, is they're trying to implement ALM, so parts of the HDMI 2.1 spec. How much that matters, I don't know. Most TVs support FreeSync. How important that is. That obviously there are some features in there that you might want, like ALLM, although that's not my favorite. but you could go various different places with that, and it certainly seems like they're at least taking advantage of the time they do have to try to shore up maybe some of the system's weaknesses, not the hardware weaknesses, but the software weaknesses. So that's certainly a welcome change, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a couple of telling comments in there. They're still working on improving ray tracing performance, and also, yeah, as you say, they're looking to improve the upscaling situation. It surely must be FSR4. And to be fair, in terms of this, is it a negotiation with AMD? There's still this situation where, RDNA 3 and RDNA 3.5 aren't going away, and yet AMD don't seem to want to support FSR4 on it, despite the fact that they do have working solutions which have actually leaked. I think the one that Valve is specifically maybe talking about is its own interpretation, which has gone into Proton, which basically uses the existing FSR4. Alex, what do you make of all of this?
Well, the ray tracing, improved ray tracing performance, you can actually read a little bit about it online. I was linked via the Graphics Programming Weekly blog, via a person on Blue Sky called Inhuman. It's 44 instead of A there. Inhuman linked me a blog from Pixel Cluster talking about RADV RT improvements. And it has to do with a lot of stuff, but basically stalls and the way the driver automatically compiled things down. So there are going to be improvements there. This blog will maybe be showing on screen right now if I send it to Oliver. And there's a lot of stuff there. Basically, a lot of it actually does have to do with Unreal Engine, which is interesting. But it's not like a problem with Unreal. It's a problem with the way the driver's been doing things as to date. So that's pretty interesting. Coming back to the topic though of Steam Machine itself, one thing that I do not like about this press statement, and it's fine, they're going to have to delay it, they're going to have to increase the price. This is all stuff that just makes sense nowadays. But I still don't like that they're saying, in our testing, the majority of Steam titles play great
Right.
at 4K 60 FPS with FSR on Steam Machine. FSR is very nebulous. They probably mean FSR 1 there. I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't think they actually mean FSR 2 because majority of titles, when you, even in ultra performance mode, are not going to be 4K 60 on this GPU. I really don't think so. There's just too many variables there. And even then, that's not like a visual output you'd want. You know,
Oh, I see what you're saying, Alex. You're suggesting that maybe because they do have FSR baked into the OS
right.
as a filter.
Yeah, they don't say FSR 2 there or whatever. And another thing is that I think kind of like Microsoft, them saying the Xbox Series S is a 1440p machine, which is just straight up bogus. Like the idea, like it's just not at all panned out at all for that machine. Like maybe in a couple titles at 30 FPS with upscaling, but it definitely isn't a 1440p machine. I don't think you should attach a device to a resolution. It just ends up never panning out well. And just gets you into trouble. And it just makes you look kind of silly when the thing comes out and everyone's like, this doesn't run Alan Wake 2 at 4K 60. You know what I mean? So, you know, that I just don't like that. I wish they would distance themselves from those original statements. Instead, they're kind of doubling down on it here, which makes me less than happy to see, especially when this thing comes out. It's going to be more delayed than before, and there's going to be even more heavy to run Unreal Engine 5 games by that time. So, yeah, I just really wish they would change their tune here.
John, thoughts?
I agree with you, Alex, but at the same time, you know, when you look, I think they're just judging the Steam library as a whole, and like most games are not UE5 games, right? And like even on the Steam Deck right now, like a lot of games played great. You know, more do than don't, I would say, versus because you know not everything's high end, but there's even nobody would claim the Steam Deck is a 4K 60 machine, but it can technically do that. It just, you know, depends on the game. But I agree, like, I don't like tying resolutions and frame rates to a specific piece of hardware unless it's Sega Model 3, in which case, yeah, by all means, like everything's 60 on there. But with especially like we've seen it with consoles where like they're like, oh yeah, we got the 4K machine, or we're gonna put 8K on the chip or the box or something. That's stupid. It never pans out. And PC, it's even less so, I would say, because yeah, it's just this is not going to be a machine where you can promise that across the board.
No.
Even if a good number of titles can do it. So, and the FSR thing is rather nebulous, but I think this is interesting. But reading through the whole FAQ that they just put out, but my eye was drawn to above that is the Steam frame, because I've been hearing things about the Steam frame and it continues to excite me. It does seem to be pretty capable hardware in terms of what it can run on the device. And it seems like we're going to have some pretty cool stuff there. But they mentioned specifically the thing about glasses. And I've also heard that people were having issues with glasses in terms of like width fitting in there properly. But, and this is very important, they have specifically said that they will try to make prescription lens inserts available ahead of launch. And as somebody that always uses prescription lens inserts on my VR headsets, this is a godsend. And if they're saying this out of the gate, that suggests that the headset's designed in a way to allow easy attachment, like the Quest 3 versus PSVR 2, which was pretty bad for that because they didn't really take it into account. And so the lenses just kind of have to like sit on there, and it's not great. But this all got me wondering about combining Steam frame and the Steam machine and how effective of a combination that might be, because that seems like an interesting kind of use case. You'd have like, you know, a portable little PC that could potentially do VR where you need it. So even if you can't run all your VR games on the headset locally, even if there's going to be some, conceivably this would be akin to like carrying around like a portable GPU with your laptop, right? You got your little Steam machine in a little box. You could take it somewhere or wherever you want to go, and then that just becomes your wireless like processor for PC VR. And there's no reason I don't think you could run. I mean, I don't see any like potential issues in terms of supporting even demanding games like Half-Life Alyx, of course, right? Like the Steam machine should be able to handle that just fine.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, curious stuff. One thing which actually I noticed in the FAQ here, I don't think we've had explicit confirmation before of this, Oliver. I might be wrong, but the fact is that the memory is upgradable and it's DDR5 SODIMM, so it's like laptop memory.
Well, the
Was that
system
known?
memory. Yeah, the system memory and the SSD, they're both upgradable, but no other component of the system is upgradable to my knowledge.
Yeah, the SODIMMs don't. Well, they have obviously shot up in cost compared to before, but I don't think quite as much as like the standard desktop memory kits.
now,
So I
Rich,
guess-
let me ask you this though: what if they had found a way to opt for DDR4 instead?
they would have had to use a different CPU, basically.
I see.
Yeah, the CPU that they've
That's a
chosen
shame.
has only got DDR5 support, so that just wouldn't really have happened.
That's
Yeah,
a shame. 'Cause
I mean-
the DDR4 prices are still not insane.
Yeah, they've gone up as well, obviously, but it isn't quite as bad. It's like half the cost for the equivalent.
Exactly.
memory. Yeah. Where do you think price is going to land, Oliver?
Oh, geez, put me on the spot.
Yeah.
It's Turkey, $900.
That's
Wow.
that's
Okay.
pretty reasonable. Actually, I think that's pretty dead on. Actually, I was going to say between 800 and 900.
Okay. Sort of like a moment of silent shock there with those pronunciations. That's a lot.
900 would be crazy to me if I heard that back in October, but now I think it's like, if it was 800 before or 750 before, could it be 850? Could it be 900? I think it definitely could.
Yeah, okay. We got this question from Mr. Burns, one of my heroes. Valve claims they have work to do to land on concrete prices and launch date for the Steam machine. Am I too cynical for thinking they are playing the old game of chicken when it comes to quote unquote console pricing because they're hoping for the console manufacturers and GPU vendors to break the inevitable bad news first? What can Valve actually work on given that RAM and storage pricing are actually unlikely to go down before 28, 29. Yeah, well, I don't think they're actually comparing themselves to a console anymore. They've put out very firm messaging that they want to be compared to like the cost of being able to build this machine for yourself, and then stuff like the form factor, the cooling solution, etc., are kind of like gravy on top of that. So I think they've actually got a relatively generous amount of leeway on pricing. I don't think there's any reason to, wait for other people to come out with the bad news first, because there's a lot of bad news out there already. What do you think, Oliver?
I think they're probably just trying to firm up. Like, we know that Valve is not one of these players like Apple who operate on like yearly time spans with regard to their memory supplies,
Right.
with regards to their, upstream inputs for their products. Valve presumably just has to secure enough memory for long enough to satisfy the expected demand they're going to have, and then probably some on top of that, in order to make sure they can produce enough units. So I think it's more of a supply chain question. Launching the console, it's more of a supply chain issue than it is an issue of wanting other people to break the bad news first. I actually think Valve is in a position where they have to break the bad news kind of first, or at least relatively early in the cycle, because they don't have 6 months, a year of product supply in the pipeline.